Welcome back to All Protocols Open, the podcast where we explore what it really means to make AI education accessible to everyone, everywhere. In our last episode, we explored the transformative potential of AI in computational biology with Victory Yinka Banjo. If you missed it, be sure to watch it again. I'm your host, Rumaisa, and today we are thrilled to welcome Pedro Makhoul, Assistant Professor of Management at InSpur São Paulo. Pedro's research bridges the worlds of corporate strategy, organizational design, and the nuanced dynamics of non-market environments. His work sheds light on how firms navigate complex stakeholder landscapes, especially in times of rising nationalism and shifting global sentiments. Pedro, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Rumaisa, for having me here.
So, to get us started, I want to take things back to the student experience. Since many of our listeners are still undergrads and they're still figuring out their paths, it's a period filled with a lot of uncertainty for them and a lot of choices that they need to make. And hearing how others navigated their own journeys or that stage in particular can be very valuable to them. So many undergraduates do worry about picking a career path. So when you were an undergraduate, how did you decide between industry, research, or teaching? And what would you tell your younger self now?
All right. So background, so I'm now a professor at InSpur, which is exactly where I did my undergrad, which at the start was a bit awkward because my colleagues were my professors. But anyway, when I got into InSpur, I was, let's say, just like the average InSpur freshman student, which really wants to go work on a bank or an investment bank or in a consulting firm, in an asset management or something like that. Um, and that's what I did. Right after the first semester at InSpur, I got a very prestigious internship at Citibank, which was super selective, and I got in. And what happened is that what I got from that experience is that I really didn't want to do that. So from that, I started reflecting. So I got really what I wanted, but then I figured out that's not what I really wanted. And so what do I want? And then I started noticing that on classes and everything, felt like the need to go a bit deeper. So I would ask questions to professors, and they're like, "Okay, this is like a great question, but like I we don't have like an exact answer for this. This is not the class content, right?" And I figured that I really liked solving puzzles, let's say. I was very curious, and that's how I figured that like academia would be probably a good career for me. So I started working as a research assistant to a professor, and from then I never stopped. That was in my first year actually, beginning of my second year as an undergrad, and from then on I never stopped. It doesn't come quite this easy for everyone. I was lucky to have it like on my second go, but I think the point is, you know, it's a trial and error thing.
So, I mean, you mentioned just now that you experimented quite a lot yourself in order to be able to figure out. So, you had quite a journey and a very well-structured roadmap. So, in particular, are there any particular, internships or basically what small experiments should undergrads be pursuing or conducting with their lives? For example, like enrolling in internships or courses or projects, especially with pertaining to your respective field, what do you think is relevant today for them?
Well, I guess when you're in undergrad and you have like all these options, basically you have very low stakes, right? So you can engage into what you're calling small experiments, and it's not really costly. Sure, you're gonna have to dedicate a bit more time, and you may waste time, which is actually never wasted, on things that you don't like. But if you're not one of those people that are born knowing what they want to do. I don't know. I always wanted to be a doctor. I didn't have that, but it's always worth pursuing this low stakes experiment. So enrolling internships, going to like the, I don't know, entrepreneurship entity of your student entity of your university. Enroll in a course that you're interested into. I don't know, go talk to some professor, try to do some research with them. So basically narrow down what you want, and from experiences, you will at least figure out what you don't want. And that's extremely valuable.
I totally agree with that. I think that's just as valuable as knowing what to do because that's sort of the way there. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think the next question that this leads us to is, right, you started pursuing research quite early on during your undergrad degree, as you mentioned. And several students do want to move toward research. And when they do move toward research, they often struggle to find their thing in it, like that one question that would excite them. So, how did you know which research paths were worth committing to, and what signals should students ideally be looking for when deciding whether to double down or pivot on research?
Uh, so that's a complex question. So let's break it down. First, how do I know what do I want to do? Well, really depends on the field that you are working on. But let's say you are working in management or strategy as I do. This is a very phenomenological type of research, right? We observe what's happening in the world and we try to understand it through theoretical lenses and apply empirical methods with rigor to understand situations. Basically, like if you see things in the world and they are like, I don't really care about that, you're not going to want to research that. You're not going to want to commit, let's say, 4 or 5 years of your life, because that's the duration of like a paper for publishing in a top journal. It's not a short cycle. You're not going to want to commit that much time to something that you don't like. So I'd say it often starts with observing the world. What's happening, what interests me. Um, it's about curiosity. You see things happening, and one thing of academia or academics is that we usually see things in a different light than, let's say, most people. Because we are naturally curious and we start asking, like, what's behind this? What's driving this? And I think that's a good way to start. Of course, if you're already enrolled in a doctoral program or you're already trying to pursue this, you have classes, and from classes you start getting interested in things. But I would say it's very much based on our observation of the real world. So just follow kind of your curiosity and do things that really interest you, because those are really large investments. So that's one part. Second part is how do I know what's worth pursuing, and how do I know when to double down or pivot? That is a harder question. It's very context depending, and it takes some experience to do that. One thing my advisors told me one time, and that it's kind of hard to recognize, is that a bad paper takes as much time as a good paper to do. And so trying to recognize when you are not in a project that you expect that will have like a really good fruition, it's time to let it go. Just in academia, just as in the real world, we are subject to going to be trapped by what we call a sunk cost fallacy, right? Like you've already invested so much, and then you're like, okay, I'm not going to abandon this because I already put so much work into this that I'm just going to keep going. Why is that a fallacy? Well, you always have to think about the marginal investment. So what I did so far that's given. That's not going to change. But what are my returns or what are my costs moving forward? Right. So when you are at a point, in a paper, in a research, where you're like, okay, I've put so much work into this, but it's not working, or I don't think the results are that interesting, or like I can't find really, I can't have access to the data that I really need to do my research. Maybe it's time to put that in a drawer and let it sit there at least. I don't know. Maybe in like 5 years, then suddenly you have the data that you needed. But for now, basically, maybe it's time to pivot to other things.
Right.
And on the double downside, well, maybe you get to a point where uh, you think it's really promising. You show your work to people, and people are saying like, okay, this is really cool. I really wanted to see this. But hey, maybe what you need to do for that paper is like, let's say, run a field experiment where you have to put like thousands of dollars to run that. Well, that's the moment that you have to decide, like, is it worth doubling down? And maybe if you have like a lot of positive feedback, yes, okay, let me try to secure grants from different places, and maybe I can get it. And it happened to me as a doctoral student, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But hey, that's life with anything.
For sure. So essentially, if you decide to double down on something, you gotta be sure that it has this potential to work out for you. And when you're pivoting, it's basically when maybe the timing is just not right as of now, or maybe things are just not going to work out, perhaps. Not currently, but they could work out in the future. And I think, yeah, no idea is a bad idea. You could always turn back to that sometime later, right?
Yeah.
So, moving to, because we were talking about your research, and so let's pivot to your strategy. To your expertise in strategy consulting and organizational design. When and how did all of this begin? And could you also share the story behind the multi-billion-dollar strategy consulting industry and how it made its way into academia and how has it exactly evolved over the years?
All right. So, story time. A little curiosity here. Strategy is actually one of the most recent social science fields there is. If so, in the 1960s, there were only 3 books about strategy, no article whatsoever. Article, I mean like academic papers. If you Google business strategy today, like I don't know, I'm seeing here at Google, 41.5 million results in 0.72 seconds. It really has evolved, but strategy basically started appearing in the 60s. Just comparatively, if we think about economics, there is it's not a consensus, but something that is commonly regarded that economics started in 1776 as a science with the release of the book The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith.
Right.
So we're talking about 1960 versus 1776. So strategy as a science as a field is like a baby. Also, something that happened to strategy, which is usually the opposite of what happened with other fields. Strategy actually was born from industry, from practice. And it was something that was happening in the market, and then some people brought it to academia. Usually it's the opposite, right? Like it's some mathematicians do some theories, and then 30 years later, someone at a software company like finds out that there is this theorem and that they really could apply to this new kind of algorithm. and then it kind of revolutionizes computing. It's opposite. So the order of things is that it starts with academia and then it goes to industry. Strategy was not like that, and uh, and so it's pretty uh, worth telling the story of like how this management consulting firms. So before really this strategy field was born, management consulting firms were basically accounting auditors. Right? It was not really advice on businesses. It was more about like fiscal austerity. It was about like, hey, are you structuring your financial operations right? It was not about like, okay, let's look at your company and let's see what's going on. So the story starts, the strategy consulting starts with a guy named Bruce Henderson. Bruce Henderson is the founder of BCG, the Boston Consulting Group.
Okay.
So Bruce Henderson used to work at McKinsey and Company, which is one of the big five consulting firms. And when he approached a partner of McKinsey who had just recently lost an internal election, the Boston office to be managing partner, and it was like, hey, let's create our own shop. Let's create this thing, like, let's say it's a strategy consulting firm. And the fun thing is that, well, at least or so far as the story goes, this partner was like, hey, but like, are you crazy? What does even strategy consulting means? And that was the genius of Bruce Henderson because he figured like we can define what it means, and it didn't exist. And so that's how the BCG was the first strategy consulting firms. Um, and it basically started with this very famous framework, which many of you that may be interested in the consulting world know as the BCG matrix. And we'll talk more about like organizational design and these things, but basically the BCG matrix was a way of looking at companies, at the portfolio, what they did, and and analyzing what are the things that I should keep doing and what are the things that I should maybe drop. What are the things that I should be investing in? And what are the things that I should be just taking money out of this? This very simple idea led to a multi-billion-dollar industry. Of course, now there's like a lot of firms doing this, including McKinsey, for instance. And it certainly is not just about the BCG matrix anymore. This is, say, now a rudimentary tool. It's a very coarse thing. But it all started there. Now it's much more refined, basically data driven, and we look at the company. I mean, consultants look at the company in a very holistic way and try to figure out, uh, a host of different problems or opportunities. But it kind of all started there. Did I
Right.
answer
That's
the second
actually
question?
a very interesting story. Yeah, it does answer my question because it's like such an interesting story because a concept that was just defined by someone and blew up into one of the biggest industries that we have today. And it's all centered in Boston. It's amazing to, even think about it, that we were actually like quite into it. Like I think consulting is you're right, one of the biggest businesses now and very popular. So it's quite intriguing to see where we can go ahead with this as well in that sense. So apart from that, let's move on to talking about organizing and basically reshaping. How can a company's organizational design and corporate structure really make or break that company?
All right. So as I said, like it all kind of started with this BCG matrix, right? Like we had this thing like, okay, what are the projects that we're really gonna batch? What are the projects that we should cut? What are the projects that we should just those are called cash cows, right? What are the projects that we just should get money out of it? And what are the projects that, like, I don't know, kind of like a question mark? It was really a question mark, the symbol. What this answers is what should we be doing, but not where should we be placing this or how should we be structuring this, right? So many, I mean, if you think about large corporations now, almost, I mean, virtually none of them are really focused on one thing. They have several services, different divisions, different projects, products, services. And how do we then structure our company in a way that I maximize kind of like how information flows within the parties that are interested or responsible for this, versus how do I make these decisions very agile? How do I make different products or departments communicate between themselves, but at the same time have autonomy and independence? This is what organizational design and corporate structures are about. Should I have that kind of like very hierarchical structure where I have like, you know, a CEO here on top, and then like I have the directors, and then I have managers, and then I have district managers, and then I have workers, right?
It goes
So
on.
we call this like a very vertical hierarchy.
Yeah.
Or should I have that kind of like more informal, flattened structure? And we're going to talk more about those because those are kind of going viral today. But all of those choices reflect how nimble, how agile, or how precise a company may be. Those are things that have trade-offs. Those are also things that speak to regulation. So if I am BCG and I start in Boston, I operate in the United States, but now I grew large enough that I want to internationalize, and now I want to offer services in Europe. What am I going to do? Am I going to open an office there, like that is part of my company, and then I'm going to provide services there in my Europe division? Am I going to set a separate legal entity that is going to be like BCG Germany, which is its own independent company that is owned by the parent BCG company? And this has fiscal implications. So taxes are going to be different. Regulatory demands are going to be different. Liability is going to be different. And so this kind of decisions are extremely important for a firm. Let's say that BCG Germany starts flunking, all right? So they are like really struggling. They are in debt. They start having lawsuits, and people are demanding money, and they are like going bankrupt. But now, if they are a subdivision of original BCG, the original BCG has to pay for those things. You
Yeah.
can bankrupt the entire company. If I set it up as a separate legal entity, maybe I am limiting the disaster there. Like
Right.
whatever. Okay, BCG Germany is going to go down. It's going to go bankrupt, but the original company is intact. However, now if I'm BCG Germany and I'm trying to get a loan from a bank because I need money to finance some projects, I am not part of the larger entity, so I cannot use that as like a collateral to get a more favorable loan rate, right?
Makes
So there are important strategic decisions that involve organizational design and corporate structure that can really, really make or break a company.
Makes sense, yeah, totally. And since we were talking about flattened hierarchies, you just mentioned it a while ago. So maybe like you could enlighten us, is there a new organizational paradox happening? Or are flattened hierarchies here to stay? Or are they really the solution to everything? And for audience, could you briefly also define what flattened strategies are for those who don't know?
Yeah, of course. So we talk about like those very vertical organizational structures, right? Like where I have the CEO on top and then like a bunch of layers of managers. And so like the let's say the it's like by so many levels of hierarchies from the CEO that communication between them, it's like it's very difficult. Also, this is usually associated to a more formal or authoritarian, even kind of corporate culture, right? So when what's been kind of going on, especially in the startup world, is that many newer companies are just favoring kind of like a flat structure. So sure, we have a founder or whatever, but we don't have all these layers of managerial discretion. So it means flat because it's a more horizontal structure.
Right.
Everyone is kind of leveled. Of course, there may be some differences, who's making a decision or what, but it's about kind of putting everyone on the same level. And it's regarded by like newer firms as like the way to business, right? It's the way to organize. We don't need these very formal structures that are let's say bureaucratic and heavy. We want to be nimble, we want to be on our toes. If anything that happens, it's like one hierarchy away from communicating to the CEO. And there are advantages to that. As saying, this is a much lighter structure. It's easy. The flow of information is easier. Kind of the culture is a bit more relaxed too. It's not so formal. Is this the solution to everything, though? That's a good question. So some have really pointed out so that we have like empirical evidence that flattened structures, especially for younger firms that are starting out, can be really good because it gives them agility and the flexibility that they need. However, let's talk about when we start to grow, right? So hierarchies are basically meant to separate strategic vision and facto power of decision, right? So the part is that I have people in different layers that are looking at kind of a angle of the company. The more that I go up on my structure, so the higher that I go, I am looking to broader things. So in undergrad course at InSpur of competitive and corporate strategy, for instance, I say that this class is meant for a CEO view. We are not going to talk about really the like details of the marketing operation or the logistics or anything like that, but we're going to try to see the company as a whole and abstract from the details. When you are in a higher hierarchy, that's usually what you do.
Okay.
However, if you are in a very flat structure, who's going to do that? Like, who is going to look at the company from a very broad view? And who's going to look at the company in a very specific perspective? Because those are equally important. You do
Yeah.
need the floor manager that is looking there at the customer experience and like how are employees faring, how are the stores next door changing their prices or on customers. Like we need to do that as a company, right? Like
Yeah.
this is at the end what we do if you are like selling a product, for instance. But when you have a large corporation, you cannot have that floor manager or that store manager that is looking at his location and making decisions based on that, trying to say what's happened to the whole company. because they are what we call and this is not this is not to diminish or anything. This is just called myopia. Like you're just looking at what's right ahead of you, but you're
Yeah.
not seeing the big picture, right? So in a sense, like, are flattened structures the answer for it all? I don't think so. The structures have a good aspect of being good in communication. However, uh, decision making delegation is not awesome. And we also have research supporting that. We have research supporting that flattened structures often side, well, more often make wrong decisions on strategic issues because of this myopic view
Right.
that don't have this broader or tiered kind of approach. The decisions are faster, but they are more frequently wrong. Um, and and can die from that just as well as they can die from not acting. Many years ago, we had Polaroid being like the company for photography, right? Like you took a picture and it would print right out. Right now, it's kind of coming back, right, as a kind of as a
Yeah.
trend.
Very
Yeah, but like that would be that used to be like the dominant thing. It was not like a trend. It was not like a cute thing. No, it was like that's how photography used to work. And they were huge, but they didn't see change coming. And part of that was because they have like such a bureaucratic, large structure that communication was not really flowing. And so they were not able to see the danger ahead. Would a flattened structure solve that? Maybe. Is it the answer for it all? I don't think so.
right. So that means that I think different organizational levels are still, or organization strategies are still going to be relevant moving forward. Like, it's not likely that flattened hierarchies are going to replace, for example, more tiered ones or more hierarchical ones, right?
I to say anything on the extremes, likely wrong. Things tend to be more centered. But we definitely learn lessons from new, let's say, trends of our of having more flattened structures because there are valuable insights there.
For sure, for sure. And speaking of trends, actually, the buzzword today is all AI, right? So are we seeing now the end of the consulting bonanza? How is AI influencing this new era of management consulting? What's your take on it?
My take on it is that yes and no.
Mhm.
So I think many are threatened by AI, right? Like it's getting so good that you ask questions, it's solved in such an elegant manner, so quickly, and with such a variety of different approaches that it's like, I mean, someone is looking at this and like, how can I go against this? And think about companies that hire consulting firms, right? This is not a cheap thing. Okay, they pay millions and millions and millions of dollars
Yeah.
for and what really do consulting firms do? So they're going to send a team to your company, and you're going to explain whatever you want, and they're going to dig very deep into your company and come up with different plans and perspectives and action plans to a lot of this, like really a lot of this process is data collection, organization, and analysis. Now, think about the company perspective. Well, if a lot of this is about data, why would I spend millions and millions and millions of dollars hiring a firm when I can? Well, I mean, this is my data, this is my proprietary data. I already have it. Why can't I just use AI to kind
Process
of
it.
exactly? I can process it and like, okay, find patterns here, what kind of things I can get from this data? What predictions? What kind of action plans? What is going wrong? What
Yeah.
should I do?
Yeah.
And definitely AI is going to give you some answers. Some of them might be good, some of them might be bad, but uh, it's definitely going to give you something. Now, what does that mean for consulting firms? I mean, at least in my experience using AI, is that AI is great for giving you answers about hard codified knowledge. It's great about like analyzing data and patterns that you give. When you go into the field of creativity, though,
Yeah.
that's where it starts.
Pulling back. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something out, right? Like at least at the point that we are right now. And so, what does that mean for the consulting? In my opinion, it means that firms are have to rely way less on their expertise or their like kind of like value of like, okay, I'm gonna look for your data that is super complex and no one here is capable of doing this but me.
Yeah.
That's true anymore. If that was even true at some point, but at the same time, AI doesn't quite have the sometimes the experience or the creative vision that these people are trained to have. So I think it becomes much more dependent on subjective analysis. Those become much more important than really hard coded evidence itself. So it kind of changes a bit how business is conducted. Did I freeze? Can you guys hear me? Or Rumaisa pros? Technical problems.
Hey, Pedro. Yeah, it might be a technical problem with Rumaisa. I'm not in the call. Let me
All
reach
right.
out to them. Sorry.
No worries.
All right, so we're going to wrap up now. Thank you so much, Pedro, again, for sharing your expertise with us. And for anyone who wants to learn more, could you please tell us where they can find your work, perhaps?
Two things. One, if you are considering working on this or want to learn more, I we are starting a new round of the BCG project, which now you know why it's named that way here at Blended. And I would be happy to have you as a student, where we're gonna kind of do this real life simulation of what corporate consulting feels like. And if you want to learn more about my work, you can always Google my name or find my Google Scholar page, website, and you will see a little bit more about what I do for research.
Right, everyone. That's exactly how you get to know more about Pedro's work and maybe even join his blended program. So thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of All Protocols Open. We've explored the intricate dance between strategy, organizational design, and the evolving landscape of global business. If you found this conversation valuable, don't forget to share it with your network. Stay curious, stay engaged, and we'll see you next time.